Good morning, third grade. I am out in the llama pasture. Not everybody's totally behind me, but you can see they're all out grazing. If you can hear the sheep, it's because they're super jealous that I'm over here and they think that the llamas are getting snacks. Howard, I'm going to try to discourage from being on the table, but he's out here right next to me, won't leave me alone. I had quite a long weekend. Didn't get as much done as I had hoped to. You know, same old, same old. Ouch, Howard, don't nibble on me. I went running this morning, you guys. That's why I'm all sweaty. Not going as hot as I had hoped, but it's going. Remember, Ron and Hermione were super mad at each other. We are on Flight of the Fat Lady. Remember that Crookshanks had just attacked Scabbers, and Ron and Hermione got into a huge fight. Ron was still in a bad mood with Hermione the next day. He barely talked to her at all through herbology, even though he, Harry, and Hermione were working together on the same puffapod. "How's Scabbers?" Hermione asked timidly, as they stripped the fat pink pods from the plants and emptied the shining beads into a wooden pail. "He's hiding at the bottom of my bed, shaking," said Ron angrily, missing the pail and scattering beans all over the greenhouse floor. "Careful, Weasley, careful!" cried Professor Sprout, as the beans burst into bloom before their very eyes. They had Transfiguration next. Harry, who had resolved to ask Professor McGonagall after the lesson whether he could go into Hogsmeade with the rest, joined the line outside the classroom, trying to decide how he was going to argue his case. He was distracted, however, by a disturbance at the front of the line. Lavender Brown seemed to be crying. Parvati had her arm around her and was explaining something to Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas, who were looking very serious. "What's the matter, Lavender?" said Hermione, anxiously, as she, Harry, and Ron went to join the group. "She got a letter from home this morning," Parvati whispered. "It's her rabbit, Binky. He's been killed by a fox." "Oh," said Hermione, "I'm so sorry, Lavender." "I should have known," said Lavender tragically. "You know what this day is, right? The 16th of October. The thing you're dreading, it will happen on the 16th of October. Remember? She was right. She was right." The whole class was gathered around Lavender now. Seamus shook his head seriously. Hermione hesitated. Then she said, You were dreading Binky being killed by a fox?" "Well, not necessarily a fox," said Lavender, looking up at Hermione with streaming eyes, which means like crying eyes. "But I was obviously dreading him dying, wasn't I?" "Oh," said Hermione. She paused again. Then, "Was Binky an old rabbit?" "No, he was only a baby." Parvati tightened her arm around Lavender's shoulders. "But then, why would you dread him dying?" said Hermione. Parvati glared at her. "Well, look at it logically," said Hermione, turning to the rest of the group. "I mean, Binky didn't even die today, did he, Lavender? You just got the news today?" Lavender wailed loudly. "And she can't have been dreading it, because it's come as a real shock." "Don't mind Hermione, Lavender," said Ron Loudy. "She doesn't think other people's pets matter very much." Remember they're talking about Professor Trelawney's prediction in class. The thing you're dreading will happen on the 16th of October. That's what they're talking about. Professor McGonagall opened and Hermione doesn't like Professor Trelawney, if you'll remember. She thinks that her class is like garbage, rubbish. She doesn't believe in divination, and so, yeah, that's why she's trying to disprove it. And then, of course, Ron jumps on the, she hates everybody else's pets bandwagon because he's mad about Scabbers. Professor McGonagall opened the classroom door at that very moment, which was perhaps lucky. Hermione and Ron were looking daggers at each other, which looking furiously at each other. And when they got into class, they seated themselves on either side of Harry and didn't talk to each other all lesson. Harry still hadn't decided what he was going to say to Professor McGonagall when the bell rang at the end of the lesson. "Howard! Gosh!" Harry still hadn't decided what he was going to say to Professor McGonagall when the bell rang at the end of the lesson, but it was she who brought up the subject of Hogsmeade first. "One moment, please," she called as the class made their way to leave. "As you're all in my house, you should hand your Hogsmeade permission forms to me before Halloween. No form, no visiting the college." Oh, this go. I'm telling you, he's driving me nuts. Stop it, I'm reading. No form, no visiting the village, so don't forget. Neville put up his hand. Please, Professor, I think I've lost. Your grandmother sent me yours directly, Longbottom, said Professor McGonagall. She seemed to think that might be safer than sending it with you. Ask her now, Ron hissed at Harry. Oh, but, Hermione began. Go for it, Harry, said Ron stubbornly. Harry waited for the rest of the class to disappear. Then he headed over nervously to Professor McGonagall's desk. Yes, Potter? Harry took a deep breath. Professor, my aunt and uncle, forgot to sign my permission form, he said. Professor McGonagall looked over her square spectacles at him, but didn't say anything. So, do you think it would be all right? I mean, would it be okay if I just go to Hogsmeade? Could you sign it for me? Professor McGonagall looked down and began shuffling papers on her desk. I'm afraid not, Potter, she said. You heard what I said. No form, no visiting Hogsmeade. That's the rule. But, Professor, my aunt and uncle, they're muggles. They don't really understand about Hogwarts forms and stuff, said Harry, while Ron egged him on with vigorous nods. If you said I could go, but I don't say so, said Professor McGonagall, standing up and piling her papers neatly into a drawer. The form clearly states that a parent or a guardian must give permission. She turned to look at him with an odd expression on her face. Was it pity? I'm sorry, Potter, but that's my final word. You'd better hurry or you'll be late for your next class. There was nothing to be done. Ron called Professor McGonagall a lot of names that greatly annoyed Hermione, and probably names that I would get y'all in trouble with for saying. Hermione assumed that an all-for-the-best expression that made Ron even angrier, and Harry had to endure everyone in class talking loudly and happily about what they were going to do first once they got into the village of Hogsmeade. There's always the feast, said Ron in an effort to cheer Harry up. You know, the Halloween feast in the evening? The Halloween feast was always good, but it would taste a lot better if he was coming in after a day in Hogsmeade with everyone else. Nothing anyone said made him feel any better about being left behind. Dean Thomas, who was good with a quill, had offered to forge Uncle Vernon's signature on the form, but as Harry had already told Professor McGonagall he hadn't had it signed, it was no good. Ron half-heartedly suggested the invisibility cloak, but Hermione stamped on that one, reminding Ron what Dumbledore had said to them about the Dementors being able to see through them. Percy had what were possibly the least helpful words of comfort. Remember Percy is his older brother, the prefect, who's kind of like a rule follower and kind of a stinker? They made a fuss about Hogsmeade, but I assure you, Harry, it's not all it's cracked up to be, he said, seriously. All right, the sweet shop's pretty good, but Zonko's joke shop, frankly, dangerous. And yes, the Shrieking Shack is always worth a visit, but really, Harry, apart from all those things, you're not really missing a lot. On Halloween morning, Harry awoke with the rest and went down to the breakfast feeling thoroughly depressed. Though doing his best to act normally, we'll bring you lots of sweets back, like treats, back from Honeydukes, said Hermione, looking desperately sorry for him. Yeah, loads, said Ron. He and Hermione had finally forgotten their squabble about Crookshanks in the face of Harry's disappointment. Well, that's good, friends. Don't worry about me, said Harry, in what he had hoped was an offhand voice. I'll see you at the feast. Have a good time. Hank and Reese, I can see y'all talking from over here. I see you. I know you're not talking, but you're talking. You're like giving each other hands. Just cut it out, please. You're distracting everybody, including me, the reader. Thank you. Don't worry about me, said Harry, in what he'd hoped was an offhand voice. I'll see you at the feast. Have a good time. He accompanied them to the entrance hall, where Filch, the caretaker, was standing inside the front doors, checking off names against a long list, peering suspiciously into every face, and making sure that no one was sneaking out who shouldn't be. Staying here, Potter, shouted Malfoy, who was standing in line with Crabbe and Goyle. Scared of going past the Dementors on your way out? Harry ignored him and made his solitary way up the marble staircase, through the deserted corridors, and back to Gryffindor Tower. Password, said the fat lady, jerking out of a doze, like she was sleeping. Fortuna Major, said Harry listlessly. The portrait swung open and he climbed through the hole into the common room. It was full of chattering first and second years and a few older students who had obviously visited Hogmeade so many times that the novelty had worn off. Harry! Harry! Hiya, Harry! Oh boy, it was Colin Creevy, a second year who was deeply in awe of Harry and never missed an opportunity to speak to him. Aren't you going to Hogsmeade, Harry? Why not? Hey! Colin looked eagerly around at his friends. You can come sit with us if you like, Harry. No thanks, Colin, said Harry, who wasn't in the mood to have a lot of people staring avidly at the scar on his forehead and asking him a bunch of questions about his past. I've got to go to the library. I have a lot of schoolwork that I need to get done. After that, he had no choice but turn right around and head back out of the portrait hole again. What was the point of waking me up? The fat lady called grumpily after him as he walked away. Harry wandered dispiritedly towards the library, but halfway there he changed his mind. He didn't feel like working. He turned around and came face to face with Filch, who had obviously just seen off the last of the Hogsmeade visitors. What are you doing? Snarled Filch suspiciously. Nothing, said Harry truthfully. Nothing, spat Filch, his jaws quivering unpleasantly. A likely story, sneaking around on your own. Why aren't you in Hogsmeade buying stink pellets and belch powder, like barf powder, and whizzing worms like the rest of your nasty little friends? Harry shrugged. Well, go back to your common room where you belong, snapped Filch, and he stood glaringly until Harry had passed out of sight. But Harry didn't go back to the common room. He climbed a staircase, thinking vaguely of visiting the owlry to see his pet Hedwig, and was walking along another corridor when a voice from inside one of the rooms said, Harry! And I'm not going to tell you who that is, because it is time for me to shut this off. I got way too much work to do today. I'm going to be sending your parents a big email with a week's worth of stuff today, hopefully by noon. I'm just a little bit behind on it. I hope that you guys had a good time seeing the llamas in the pasture. Oh, here comes Howard creeping up. No doubt about it. I hope that you guys are having a good morning. Sorry that they're not closer to me. I'll work on that. They just got let out into this pasture, so they're off eating as much as they absolutely can, and all the cars driving by are like stopping in the middle of the road wondering what I'm doing out here with a table and a Harry Potter book and a bunch of llamas. So, have a good rest of your day. Be good for your parents. Beep, beep, I'm a sheep. What is it? Bark, bark, I'm a shark. I've been thinking about this for like a solid week. I miss you guys. I will talk to you soon. Bye.